Probably the most dangerous job in the world would have to be working as an undercover cop. There are plenty of movies and TV shows about cops who had insane undercover operations to bust all sorts of criminals. And while these tales seem too crazy to be true, some are real. There are plenty of real-life examples of cops going deep undercover in the pursuit of justice. Cops who had insane undercover operations were often left shattered, isolated, and alone rather than rewarded. Some paid the ultimate price, while others were so shattered from the experience they lived out their days in bitter retirement. Here are some undercovers that lived chilling experiences performing a dangerous duty. Michael Malone. Michael Malone had all the makings of an undercover agent who would successfully infiltrate Al Capone's Chicago gang for nearly 2 years. After finessing his way into Capone's inner circle in 1929, Malone proved invaluable to his superiors in the Treasury Department, pursuing a tax evasion case against the Chicago crime boss. Despite the danger, Malone kept an iron will. Blowing his cover would have proved fatal, but given his skill, it didn't happen. From 1929 to 1931, Malone fed intelligence about Capone that would culminate in the historic conviction of the nation's most notorious mob boss. When Capone's jury trial commenced, the Treasury Department removed Malone from his undercover job. In the Chicago courthouse, Malone happened to enter an elevator where Capone stood with his defense lawyers. "The only thing that fooled me was your looks," Capone is said to have remarked to Malone. "You look like a wop. You took your chances, and I took mine. I lost. And remember, if they send one of your guys to the hospital, send one of theirs to the morgue." After Malone's death in 1960, the department described him as the best undercover agent we ever had. Joaquin Jack Garcia. One of the most successful undercover FBI special agents of all time is Joaquin Jack Garcia. While other undercover operatives tend to lay low and draw as little attention to themselves as possible, Garcia used his massive 6'4", 300-pound frame to muscle his way into the ranks of several different crime families and into the circles of corrupt cops, often overlapping his investigations with numerous identities. For more than 2 years, Garcia posed as Jack Falcone, an associate to the Gambino crime family of La Cosa Nostra in New York City. His investigation resulted in the conviction of 32 gangsters, including several key members of the family. Concurrently, Garcia posed as a different New York-based mobster and concluded a 3-year FBI sting in Florida that brought down 4 dirty cops. During the same time frames as his New York and Florida operations, Garcia participated in 2 separate undercover operations in Atlantic City that targeted corrupt politicians and a Boston sting targeting corrupt cops. According to a veteran law enforcement official who worked with him, Garcia is the best undercover agent the Bureau has ever had. While undercover, Garcia posed as a jewel thief mobster who also sold drugs. He played his part so well, members of the famed Gambino crime family took him in and made him a top member in their administration. In 2008, he released an autobiography which was adapted into a film that, as of April 2017, has not been released. Dominic Polifrone. Richard the Iceman Kuklinski was a meticulous, evasive hitman believed to have killed as many as 200 men, mostly for prominent mafia crime families. Surprisingly, he earned his nickname not for his cold-blooded demeanor, but for his tendency to freeze his victims to obscure their time of death. Talk about the cold shoulder. Despite knowing that Kuklinski was a hired killer with an insane body count, none of the federal agencies tracking his movements could gather any definitive evidence of his crimes until they inserted an undercover operative in his midst. Enter Dominic Polifrone, a New Jersey cop with as much ice in his veins as his target. Over the course of 18 months, Polifrone posed as a hardened criminal to earn Kuklinski's trust. The pair met in out-of-the-way places to talk shop, and Kuklinski eventually gave up enough information about his crimes, in particular his use of a cyanide-laced hamburger to kill a gang member, for Polifrone and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to take him down. In 1988, Kuklinski was sentenced to life imprisonment and an additional 30-year sentence after confessing to the murder of a mob-connected police officer, all due to undercover work by Polifrone. Frank Serpico. Hippie cop Frank Serpico described the NYPD in 1970. 10% of the cops in New York City are absolutely corrupt. 10% are absolutely honest, and the other 80% they wish they were honest. Patrol officers paid bribes to be assigned a patrol car because having a patrol car meant you could make your rounds, shaking down drug dealers, collecting from gamblers, and making look the other way deals with bar owners and businesses. Instead of playing along, Serpico went public about the corruption he witnessed. He and the Knapp Commission caught a break when Bill Phillips, a former Manhattan patrolman, was caught accepting payoffs from Xaviera Hollander, a Dutch-born madam running an Upper East Side brothel. Phillips started talking immediately, giving first-hand accounts of how other cops and detectives in nearly every precinct set up monthly pads or systemized payoffs to protect gamblers, pimps, and other members of organized crime. Serpico retired in 1972 after he was shot during a raid on a drug dealer's apartment. According to Serpico, the two backup officers on the raid with him purposely stayed back when Serpico busted through the door. They were later awarded medals for saving his life, though neither one even called for an ambulance. Joe Pistone. One of the most famous undercover cops known to the public would have to be Joe Pistone, an FBI agent who worked undercover between September 1976 and July 1981. To curb a wave of truck hijackings in New York City that averaged 5 a day, the FBI transferred Joseph D. Pistone to the city and set him up with a fake identity as a small-time jewel thief named Donnie Brasco. For 5 years, Pistone hung around locations frequented by the Bonanno crime family believed to be behind the hijackings, making himself known but keeping a low profile so as not to raise suspicion. Eventually, Pistone met Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero, a foot soldier for the family with 26 kills under his belt. The two became friends, with Ruggiero vouching for Pistone at the risk of his own life. Ordered to commit murders himself, Pistone had to come up with scenarios to avoid killing anyone and even had the FBI stage a fake killing. When the family fractured and Pistone was ordered to kill rival leader Anthony Bruno Indelicato, the FBI pulled the plug on the operation and attempted unsuccessfully to arrest Indelicato. Pistone's investigation resulted in the arrest and conviction of over 100 mobsters and effectively destroyed the Bonanno family, which responded by putting a $500,000 bounty on his head. Pistone is still hiding with his family. His story was famously documented in the 1997 Mike Newell movie Donnie Brasco, starring Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. Robert Killian. After having already spent 24 years with the Orange County Sheriff's Office and other agencies, Robert Killian took on the challenge of his life when he accepted an assignment with the Intelligence Division to go undercover to investigate white supremacist bikers in Central Florida. Killian, who calls himself Doc, donned leathers and jewelry and rode his Harley to bars frequented by the Outlaws motorcycle gang and the 1st SS Cavalry Brigade, the Aryan Nation's motorcycle gang. Slowly, over the course of 7 years, Killian ingratiated himself with the gangs and built relationships with August Crace, the head of the Aryan Nation splinter faction called Christian Identity, who offered him membership. He was worried that his cover might not hold, but became extremely concerned when he learned that the Aryan Nation's deputy director was a police officer. Killian eventually amassed enough evidence to bring down 6 key members of the Outlaws and the 1st SS Cavalry Brigade and force the resignation of the racist cop. Unfortunately, it wasn't easy to leave the biker life behind just because the job was done, and Killian lost his wife, his family, and his career in law enforcement. William Queen. Sitting behind a desk was not what William Queen wanted to do in law enforcement, so he accepted one undercover operation after another, infiltrating the Aryan Nation, the KKK, and other groups before landing the gig that made him famous: outlaw biker with the San Fernando Valley Mongols. For 2 years, he hung out in seedy bars, rode stolen motorcycles, and got into fights with competing biker gangs, eventually becoming a full-patched member and rising to the level of chapter vice president. Queen claims to have abstained from doing drugs while pretending to be a Mongol and describes in his book the various ways that he got away with not doing them, but he admits to reveling in being as mean and as violent as he wanted to be, the baddest of the bad. Queen's investigation resulted in the arrest of scores of bikers and the convictions of 53 gang members and earned him the Medal of Honor as well as celebrity within law enforcement circles and a movie deal. But if he had to do it all over again, Queen said he would pass because of the danger to his family and the fact that the Mongols are bigger and badder than ever thanks to his book. J. Dobbins. For Jay Dobbins, fitting in with the infamous biker gang the Hells Angels for almost 2 years meant adhering to his undercover alter ego, J. Bird Davis, to the point of obsession. To maintain his cover, he had to divert his mind away from his wife and kids, and it all would be worth it. At least that's what he thought at the time. While working undercover cases in the late 1980s for the ATF, he had been injured twice, from a gunshot wound to the back from a suspect in Tucson and when gunrunners hit him with a car during an attempted getaway in Chicago. He took part in investigations of the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing and the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Other undercover roles of his ended in the arrest of a Mexican drug boss and members of the Aryan Brotherhood gang. Altogether, he served in more than 500 undercover operations disguised as a hitman and mob debt collector. He infiltrated organized crime groups and gangs engaged in drug and arms smuggling. The ATF directed him to penetrate the dangerous Hells Angels Club. Dobbins certainly had the physical part down with his beard and 6' 1 inch frame he used as an all-conference football player for the University of Arizona. Later, an Angels member would apply tattoos covering his upper arms. They trusted him so much, they offered to make him a member of the Angels Skull Valley chapter. He was one of the first law enforcement officers to infiltrate the Angels. His undercover penetration of the Angels lasted more than 20 months, one of the longest ever for the ATF. His work ended with 16 arrests from the Angels gang. But the criminal case, amid problems between the ATF and Justice Department lawyers, fell through in federal court. In 2006, the feds dropped racketeering enterprise charges, the most serious, against all but 4 of 42 Angels charged in the Laughlin riot. Dobbins has authored 2 books, one on his undercover experiences and another on his travails with the ATF. These days, he delivers lectures on his life to audiences at universities and law enforcement associations nationwide. Kiki Camarena. Enrique Kiki Camarena, the late Drug Enforcement Administration agent assigned to investigate drug trafficking in Guadalajara, Mexico in the 1980s, is famous as one of the most heroic DEA agents ever. But he is more well known in death than in life. His torture murder in Mexico in 1985 took place at the hands of drug cartel bosses with the complicity of high-level Mexican government officials, law enforcement, and allegedly the CIA. Camarena was a convincing undercover officer with his appearance and ability to speak Spanish and barrio or street language to fit in with the drug underworld. His target was the powerful Guadalajara drug cartel. Camarena arranged for U.S. agents to seize international bank accounts held by wealthy cartel drug lords. He developed evidence of major marijuana plantations in the Mexican state of Zacatecas based on informants and overflights in a plane flown by his DEA pilot Alfredo Zavala Avalar. In November 1984, from his background work, Mexican federal police and the DEA raided enormous pot-growing operations on a ranch in Zacatecas that employed thousands of field hands. The task force confiscated 20 tons of marijuana, burned the crop, and made 177 arrests. The bust cost cartel figure Rafael Caro Quintero about $50 million. He vowed revenge against Camarena. Meanwhile, a DEA force organized by Camarena seized a large cache of cocaine shipped by cartel boss Miguel Felix Gallardo's operations in New Mexico and Texas. On February 7, 1985, Quintero and Gallardo directed their henchmen to kidnap Camarena off a street in Guadalajara. The gangsters also brought in and beat up Zavala, Camarena's pilot. Both men died about 2 days later, his slaying triggering an international incident. Under pressure, Mexican authorities acted, arresting 13 men, handing out multiple life convictions. Most survived, some gave all. But thanks to the diligent work of these special officers, some bad people were taken off the streets, and for that we appreciate it, more than they will ever know. Until next time.